We have a dog in the background. If it starts to bark, I'll go to a different spot. Hopefully that won't happen. Life in the office. So good morning. Thank you guys for coming today. I always get excited when we have a big group of people and it puts the pressure on. So hopefully you get some value out of today. And I think you'll walk away with some value. Feel free to ask questions. You can use the chat box, I think, right, Maggie? Are you going to keep an eye on the chat box for me? So Maggie will keep an eye on the chat box and she'll interrupt me because she knows I talk fast. So she'll look for the times that I either stop to take a drink or of water or take a breath, one or the other. So I'm going to jump in and just start sharing my screen. First, how are you all doing? Everybody holding up okay in this market? Or trying to? That might be why you're on today. Got some thumbs up. That's good. Not an easy one for sure. So Maggie actually had reached out to me and had asked if I had any ideas about helping with a course on comparables. I think she had some feedback from agents that they wanted help with comparables and strategies with buyers and sellers in this crazy market that we're in. So, I always jump at the chance to teach one if I can too, right? I'm not doing that as much lately, so it's kind of nice to get in and teach a class. So I put this together. There's thought process behind it, but we certainly can go outside the boundaries of this. I have about 35 slides, just so you know. I always like to know how much is coming at me when I'm in a course. So about 35 slides that we'll talk to the concepts behind, and then we've left plenty of time for Q&A because I think sometimes that's even more helpful, right? You're coming here for a reason. You may have specific questions around things that you may need. So, okay, so I'll jump right in. So I just decided to just put my statistics out there for my introduction. And the reason that I decided to do that is because you all should have your statistics out there too. That's something that I say to all of my agents. So you've been in the business, right, for a bit of time, especially if you have some experience. So put that out there. Buyers and sellers are looking for us oftentimes on our profiles. So it's good for them to know what they're getting with you, how much experience you have and how much you've sold and what your statistics are that are important to them. So you're going to get a copy of this presentation. Maggie, you okay with getting this out to everybody? So don't feel like you have to take notes feverishly. But you can use this outline even if you want to do that. And I'm the Penfield branch manager. I probably should have started with that. I've been a manager at Howard Hanna. I think I started in 2017. Does that math work out? Yep, 2017, about mid-year. I started in real estate in 2012. So, I haven't been an agent forever, which sometimes is good because I still think a lot like an agent. And I still know what it's like to be new. And I still try to think in that way for the agents that I teach and that I have in my branch as well. So today's agenda, we're going to have just a general discussion of what we're seeing in the market. And then I wanted to say, let's have an understanding of what's happening. And in that realm, let's talk about appreciation, because I think that's a really, really important message for today. Hopefully that's one thing that you walk away with that you hadn't thought about in a certain way. And hopefully it helps you with your buyers and your sellers. That's my goal on that one. We're going to help a little bit with sellers pricing homes appropriately and strategically. So I'll have some discussion around that. We're going to talk about helping buyers make their best offers. And helping them price as well. Data gathering in general. I'm a big data nut. If anyone sat in on any of my classes in the past, I like data. And the question around, are you their trusted consultant? Because that's really what we are out there. We're consultants, we're not salespeople. And then, as I mentioned, some Q&A at the end. So let's dive on in. So what are we seeing in today's market? How many offers is it taking before your buyer wins a house? And I ask my agents that. I ask buyers that walk in with deposit checks because we celebrate with them when they come to the office, where I always make a point of saying, congratulations, you won. And then I usually will say, how many offers did it take? Because it helps me to kind of get that general idea. Of course, I talk to my agents about that too. And I have my own buyers out there, so I know how many it's taking for them as well. And I would say on average, it's 5 to 7. If you want to hear an average, that's what I experience here. And every market's different, every buyer's different, every situation can be different. I'm hearing as many as, double digits, of course, of number of offers before they win. And I hear occasionally 1 or 2. And I'm like, boy, you got lucky, to win on your first offer, your second offer in this market is good. So part of that for me is, are we doing a good enough job, managing their expectations at the front, right? No one wants to be a negative Nelly, but are you managing their expectations? and telling them that it's going to take some time to win and helping them maybe, catch up quicker, right? So I hear from agents a lot, well, they'll figure it out. They keep saying they don't want to be at asking price or that they only want to go 5,000 over asking price. Well, our job is to help them figure it out before they get through all the pain, because it's going to be painful for all of you. And data helps with that, right? To be able to show them what is really happening. So we'll have lots of that in this presentation. List price to sale price is continuing to increase, of course. We're seeing, and I've got some data to show that year over year, we're definitely in a double-digit increase this year. I have to laugh because I had a college intern that came in to meet with me today about shadowing and, getting some exposure to the real estate industry. And, he's at St. John Fisher, getting through the finals, right? It's been a busy semester. It's a busy time. He also works part-time, I think, at a country club. So he's a busy individual. So I said, well, what do you hear about the market? And he goes, that it's crazy. So think about it when you were in college. Did anybody talk to you about the real estate market when you were in college? No, right? I didn't have a clue about the real estate market when I was in college, nor could I care. And no one talked about it. So I think it was, to me, it actually made me laugh when I told him I'm going to talk about it in the class. Because I go, even what's happening in the market. And he laughed. He's like, everybody's talking about it. You can't watch the news. You can't click on, CNN without seeing something about the housing market. There's stuff on, the local channels as well. And, if you know anyone that's, buying or selling, you're hearing all about it. And I said, absolutely. So we had a good conversation about that. Homes are still selling significantly over asking. And then I put depending on where that they started on list price, right? And I think I'm starting to see people catching up a little bit to listing a little higher, right? Okay, now we've got comps to look at. And of course, sellers want to sell at the highest amount. So they're going to price it a little higher to kind of make sure that they don't let the house go for too low of a price. So this is an interesting time, I think, because we're not, in the beginning of this season, which we can call maybe February, March, right? We saw list prices that were almost last year's prices, or even the year before that, and maybe even the year before that, right? Right? The prices that we would expect homes to see. And now I think that we're definitely seeing an adjustment to the here and now a bit, and homes are starting to price a little bit higher. So we'll talk about that through the discussion as well. Inventory is picking up, but we still have plenty of buyers in the market, and we still have an inventory issue. You all know that if you have buyers out there. There's still obviously a long ways to go to get back on track. And our opinion of home values still does matter to our buyers and sellers. And I know a lot of us just kind of put our hands up in the air and go, put an offer out there for what you want, right? I can't help you. They still want to know our guidance. It's still part of our job, is to help guide them. At the end of the day, I still do make sure that I guide them on what I think, the price should be, but I don't dictate where they go. If they want to go higher, we talk about that. If they want to go lower, we talk about that. But I still give an opinion, to a certain extent, without, maybe it's a range of an opinion. And have you adjusted your attitude to reflect reality is the next question. So, I hear from a lot of agents, that I don't want my buyer to be, upside down a year from now, right? This is a 130 neighborhood. They shouldn't be paying 160 there. And so it's an adjustment for us in this market, especially if you've been a real estate agent for a really long time.
Yeah, Tina, I just wanted to say, so when she's talking about that, like somebody being upside down in the moral and ethical issues, on the 25th, we're going to have an attorney panel, and we'll be asking some of those questions of our attorneys, and getting some legal opinion on some of that. So.
Yeah. So good. That's good to hear as well. All right, fantastic. And I have somebody talking in the background. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. All right. So we'll start with understanding what's happening now. I think this is my favorite part of the presentation, to be honest. Let's talk appreciation. So I dive in partially into my own home, right? So before we get into the general market, I show an example of my own house and return on investment on our homes in the Rochester region. So I've been in my home for 20 years. So, I feel like I'm pretty established in there, right? I've got a good handle on, my house, what I put into it. We keep a spreadsheet. That won't surprise anybody else that's on this call, that I have a spreadsheet for updates and improvements. So we paid about $170,000 for our home in the year 2000. And these are the big ticket items. We've put over $120,000 in maintenance into our house and updates in the 20 years. Now, one of them is an in-ground pool, so that's a chunk of it, of course. And before I would have said that's a detriment. Now I would say, woohoo, except we can't find chlorine. But other than that, we're in good shape, right? So, so we have a nicely finished basement. We have an in-ground pool. We just did the liner, the heater, the pump, right? So it's basically like a brand new pool. We've got a fence patio landscaping around that. We've got hardwood floor, and we've got our whole house painted new roof. The list goes on. So probably about 120 is what I estimated. In 2014 and 15, I would have told you that I would have been lucky to see 215 for my house. So, I remember saying to my husband, is homeownership even worth it in Rochester, New York, right? Like, looking at it in hindsight, like, wow, like we put, 120,000, we're basically 300 into this house, and we would have gotten 215. And that just seems like a miss, right? And now I would say that if I listed my house, I probably would put in the 275 number and see where it went. And I really think it could go more than that. So I'm in Hamlin. So Hamlin's always a little tough. Location still matters, condition still matters, right? Price still matters. All those things still matter. But I think we would be there. So what I say back to that is it's about damn time. Yay! I actually could get something back for all the work we've done. And then I tell people, think about your own home and think about your parents' house. Our parents paid, probably $30,000 for their house and what's it worth today. And it's not like they've been there for 80 years. They've been there for maybe, 40 something years. In your grandparents' home. So appreciation, we're used to a little bit of appreciation, but there are times that, we don't get enough appreciation in this market. And then I would say, buyers that bought just a few years or around the time before these increases started do feel like they're getting too high of a return on investment. No doubt about it, right? I've got my own buyers that bought 4 years ago and just sold for 40,000 more, and they haven't even, touched the paint on the wall. Okay. So I get the frustration with that, but guess what it is? It's timing, right? It's just like the stock market. They got in at the right time. They're getting out at the right time to get that return, right? And nobody has a crystal ball to know, what that timing looked like or when things would change. So they lucked out, which is great, but it's not, I think some people look at it like, see how crazy it is, see how much they got, and they only bought it 4 years ago. You have to remember that timing matters. And next couple slides. I'm going to ask you all, and I put a big stop sign on this one, to stop calling the market crazy because I hear it. And that was actually the first word that came out of the college student's mouth was, it's crazy, right? And I laughed. I said, I already have a stop sign in there for it. So I'm going to tell you in the general public to stop calling it crazy. It sends a message, I think, of fear, right? And it scares people because it's crazy out there. It's like COVID, right? It's crazy. So we want to make sure that they realize that, yes, we are definitely seeing high appreciation, but I think you have to talk to it in a factual way to calm their fears down, because to them, crazy time means don't do it now, wait. And wait might not be the right answer, right? I don't think that prices are going to drop. I really don't. I don't have a crystal ball to know for sure, but are we going to continue to see 6%, 12% increases every year? No, of course not, right? I think it's going to, get to a point where it levels off, but I also don't see it dropping. Are there people that maybe paid more for a house than they should have, and if they sold it in a year would get less? Absolutely. Is that normal in a normal market? Absolutely. Right? We always see that. I've seen houses sell before for prices that I thought, wow, I can't believe it got there. And I've seen people sell a house for less than they've paid. That's not anything new, right? It's all a little bit circumstantial. If you have someone that buys a house because they want to be near their grandchildren and they're fighting for that house and paying $30,000 more than the average buyer is going to pay for it, of course they're paying too much. But for them, that's where they wanted to be, right? And they're willing to fight for it. So everybody on this call, if you can just agree that you will stop calling the market crazy, I would really appreciate it. Go ahead, Maggie.
So yeah, recently RIS Media had a realtor who does this huge business in Massachusetts, and he did a little video on this very topic. The people you're really scaring are your sellers. So you're minimizing your listings. So instead of saying, yeah, the market's really crazy, we get 28 offers and the house will be sold in 24 hours. They translate that into, where will I go?
Yes, you're exactly right. I just had the conversation yesterday with somebody, right? They're watching one of my listings. They wanted to know, where did it sell for? and they're nervous about where they're going and what they're going to pay. So yes, everybody's in that same boat. you're
So
right.
change the dialogue to, I just had buyers over on Robinson Street, or sellers on Robinson Street. We found them a lovely home in,
Mhm.
the neighboring town, and they're very happy.
Yeah.
Change the dialogue to what you were able to do
Mhm.
with someone else, instead of, yeah, it's
Absolutely.
really crazy and we don't know what's happening. Because it
Yeah.
sounds out of control and they don't want to jump into that water. And listings are what create more business for you.
Absolutely. I had a
So
seller.
you gotta cool that water.
Yeah, I had a seller that was talking to me about that listing that I have, asking about, they're in the same neighborhood, so they want to know how did they do. And so we talked about it, and their next home is going to be a really big home, and they may end up even building. So, they're trying to figure out where do they go next. And so she said, okay, so now you got an offer. And she said, where are they going? And they know each other, right? And I said, well, they're actually going to rent for a little while, right? While they figure out kind of their next step. They're not sure if they're going to stay in New York State. They don't know, where they're going to go from here. And she's like, so they got to be out of that house. And she just starts panicking, right? And I was like, well, we built in, the post-possession, right? And actually the post-possession came at $0 per day, by the way, because it's such a great market, right? So, it's just giving them that extra breathing room sometimes that they need when they're putting themselves in that seller's spot, right? And helping them see that, you can work through it, right? And it's workable. So right to your point, Maggie. Okay, so we're all going to stop calling the market crazy, right? Let me see some head nods. Come on, you can do it. I know you still think it's crazy, but just nod your head with me and say, okay. All right. Average home appreciation. So, I started thinking, because the things that I talk about with my sellers, I like to show with data, right? Because, everybody can say, oh, that's your opinion. But when you show them data, it helps solidify it. So I looked out in the world and said, okay, the average appreciation is 3.5 to 3.8% a year nationwide. Okay, we're not the nation, we're Rochester, New York. I get it, taxes are a little bit higher here, right? Maybe we're not the sunny beach, California, but I can tell you, as my husband looks around at places to retire, and we talk about each state, every state's not perfect. And if you've ever done that, right, you got hurricanes, you got tornadoes, you got bugs, you got, a lot of different facets, poisonous snakes, right? So no place is perfect. So that 3.5 to 4%, or 3.5 to 3.8% is the average. So I said, okay, let me look at Rochester, New York, and let's just assume we had a 3% appreciation every year. We don't get a 3% appreciation every year, right? In Rochester, we're lucky. Some years we see it, some years we don't. But I just went back to 2008. I didn't go tremendously far back, but I went back to 2008, where the market was normal, right? We didn't see high prices. I know that was around the time of the housing, crash, and things kind of leveled out. But in Rochester, we didn't feel the effects of that. So those numbers aren't drastic. So if you look in the left-hand column, I've got all the years, right? 2008 until 2021. And this is Monroe County, January of each year. What is the average sale price? So you'll see we start at 120, and it gets all the way up to today at 173. If you look at the next column over, it shows you what's that appreciation every year. And some years it was 0, sad. Some it was 4, hooray, we beat the national average. More so than not, though, it wasn't close to that. It was 1, -1, 4, 0. Those are a lot in there, right? And then the last 3 years, 6, 5, and 12. Okay, so that's why everybody's rattled, right? It's that big 12% this year, and even the last couple of years of those bigger jumps than what we usually see. So I took that same 120 and I said, okay, let me apply a 3% average every year. And where would we be today? Just looking at it, apples to apples. We'd be at 176, 224 for our average sale price, and that's assuming 3% every year. Okay. So this type of data, when you show it to someone and you think of the house that I talked about, my house in there, that 2014 number, instead of 131 should have been a 143 if it was a normal, 3% appreciation every year. The point of this slide, and to put this in front of your buyers and sellers, is to say it's just long overdue, right? We're catching up, and we're actually even a little bit under if we were 3% every year, which might be normal for Rochester, okay? But, we're not drastically different than where it normally could have been. It's just that the last 3 years are drastically different. And that, to me, is kind of the nature of the beast. People are staying in their homes longer, right? So this slide, I think, can be really helpful in your packets with your buyers and your sellers to take the crazy out of, what they're feeling.
Do you
Okay.
guys know how to create this kind of a document, and do you know how to read it? Tina's the person to ask.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah, this is, if you don't know how to create this and you don't know how to read it, it's not much help. So do you know how to create it? Do you know how to read it? This is your time to ask
Excel
questions.
spreadsheet in the background. Yeah, it's just, but I can help you. So come to me. I always offer that. And agents do come to me quite often for things that they're talking about, how they want to show data. And I certainly can help you. The data source is right from GRAR when you go to the reporting, right? The market reports are in there. So I just pulled that 120, the 120, the 120, the 125. That's from each of those data points, and it's easy to get to through Matrix. There's classes that you can take as well on that, but I can walk you through it. So if you want a little bit of instruction on that, call me. I'm happy to walk you through some of that. And there's lots of different data you can get from there, but average sale price was the one I chose for today. And here it is in graph form, because some people don't like all those numbers, right? I like numbers, but I know not everybody likes numbers. So I like to show things in different ways because your audience will adapt to one or the other. So if I'm sitting with an engineer, I'm probably going to use that first one, right? They're going to understand this too, but they're going to like the numbers. So this is just in bar form, and it shows that orange line is that average, the assumption of the 3% every year, and the blue is the actual value. So you can see we got to the same endpoint. We just didn't get there the same way, right? It's been low over the years, and we're just now. So same exact information from the last slide, but in a bar, in a graph, and a line charting. Okay. Take these, by the way, they're going to be in your hot little hands. So take them, right? You don't even have to create it. You just take it and run with it. So we have to understand the data, the dynamics of the real estate in the here and now. It's our job, right? That's who we are as agents. We're the experts, right? We're supposed to be able to educate and consult our buyers and sellers, and honestly, the general public as well. That matters even more now than ever, because it's, coffee house conversations around this market. And so catching the public up on this, I think, is really, really important. It's a message that we all should be out there sharing, that it's really long overdue appreciation. And most of you are probably homeowners that have been in your homes for a long time. And I know you're surprised by the value, but if you think about what you put into your house, it shouldn't surprise you, hopefully, that you're able to get some of that back out again. All right, so that's a little bit on appreciation. I had to get that message out there to stop using the word crazy. Helping sellers price homes appropriately and strategically. It's not easy, right? Let's start there. It is not easy picking that right price. I think I've even struggled with it. So, the things that I would offer to you for tips and advice are ones that I, try to do myself. And a lot of it's through trial and error and learning. So general tips, you're looking for your comparable homes, of course, that are sold. But are you just taking those sold comps and that's what you're showing to your sellers when you're listing? You should still call those agents. Okay, it's sold, so you don't have to call them to find out what it's sold for, but there's a lot of information in the background that you don't get from just looking at a sold comp. You don't know how many showings did they get. You don't know how, what kind of price range did they see and how many offers did they get? Did it sell for more than they expected or less than they expected, and why? What are the factors that drove it? Because we can't always tell that there was, a smoky house, right? That it smelled of, cigarette smoke from a picture, obviously. So it's good to get as much information as you can on those comparables, because when you sit with the sellers and you're reviewing those comparables, you are just, obviously, you have more insight now on why it sold for what it did. And sometimes we can't explain it, but at least you're going to have more information to provide, right? And it helps set their expectations. So, if you're in Brockport and you're selling a house that's $300,000, you're not going to have as many showings as that $150,000 house. So if you're talking to sellers that are agents that had sellers that sold in that price range, they're going to tell you we only had 6 or 7 showings. That's going to help manage your expectations for your seller, because all they hear is there's 1,000 showings and 20 offers, right? So you're managing expectations. You're coming in with information that's just going to help you through this process and help not blindside anybody, right? Same on the other end of it. If you're expecting 50 showings, you're going to help them understand they really need to be flexible with showings. They need to listen to you about your strategy about delayed negotiations, because there's potentially going to be a lot of showings coming their way. And then, of course, if it's pending or under contract, you're doing that same pursuit of data, right? Reaching out to them, getting all that same information as well out of them on what it's sold for. Most people are sharing it, right? I think back in the day, it was hit or miss whether people would share. I think everybody gets the struggles that we're under, so reach out and ask. I like to use the increase in average sale price for 2021 when I'm looking at 2020 comparables, right? So if it sold for this in 2020, all things remaining, the same, is it going to be 10% more this year, 12% more because the general average is up by about that much? And it's just one more point of data. So, most of you are probably pretty good at that. You're looking at it from all different angles, right? You're looking at the comps. You're probably using RPR to attempt to get to a valuation. You might be looking at Zestimate or other things in there. So, so you want to make sure that that you're pulling in as much data as you can and seeing where all those different points come in, right? Do they all match or they're very different from each other? Contact other Howard Hanna agents from the office in that town. We're a big company, right? This is one of the benefits of working at Howard Hanna. We have, if you're listing a house in Victor and you're not normally in Victor, call Don Simonetti, call an agent that you know from that office. Call the manager, ask for an agent that maybe, sells a lot in a certain price point and try to get some insight. I think that's one of the biggest advantages to being in our company. And I've done that before, with other offices when I'm listing in a town and I'm not sure, what that neighborhood is really, selling at. I'm looking at some of the comps, but if there's not a lot of comps for a neighborhood, I like to get their idea. And look for active listings as well that have not sold, right? And speak to the agent. There aren't a lot of them out there, but when you're pulling comps, make sure you're paying attention to those and finding out why they think it's still sitting there, right? Did the sellers start too high? Did they miss, the market? Do they think that, that they were unrealistic about where they were going to get to?
Tina, the only other thing I would add to this is for those of you who aren't using your market absorption rate calculator that's available on your GoHanna dashboard, that is going to help you know how many days on market, and you can do it down on price points. So if you may be in the 200,000 or 300,000 price point and the days on market may be really short, 2-3 days, but if you're over 450, guess what? You might be in a buyer's market. Yeah. Maybe not in Pittsford because their average price is higher, but if you're in Fairport or Henrietta and you're over 450, guess what? Your days on market are probably much, much bigger, longer, so that then you can help your sellers to price right by showing them this is how many days you're going to stay on market. It's not the same market at this price point. So that's another tool that you have that's available to you in your, ask your managers, they should all know where it is on your GoHanna dashboard.
And then I'll point out that not all homes are selling through the MLS, right? So I approve contracts every day through here and many never hit the MLS. So you've got, a seller that's selling to someone they know, you have, an agent that had a buyer, the seller doesn't want to go through the hassle of being on the market for whatever reason, right? The people came together without the MLS being involved. So one of the things that I always make sure when I go to a neighborhood is that I look through the MLS for that neighborhood. You can draw a map around a neighborhood as well. And I've got a couple slides on the next one. I've got a slide that shows a couple examples. That's going to actually help you not get blindsided by the seller when he says, well, the house across the street did sell. And you're like, I didn't see that in the MLS. And they're going to say, oh, it was off market. You want to make sure you know the data. And I'll tell you why, because newsflash, owners sometimes exaggerate what they got for their house. Anybody ever been in that position? I can tell you it's happened a lot of times where I talk about houses that sell in an area and they go, oh yeah, the neighbor's house sold for 180. And I've got the comp sitting there or the realist report sitting there. And I'm like, yeah, actually it sold for 172, and they're like, well, they said 180. Yeah, it's a difference, right? So you want to make sure you're armed with that data and not, being put in a defensive mode on, what it's sold for. So to find non-MLS sales, if you're not aware of it, you would go into Realist like you normally do. And quick search, if you look in the top left-hand corner, quick search is where you usually are, right? That's where you can search the address or the last name or zip code or something in there. My search helps you drill down a little bit more. So when you click on my search, you have the ability to pull a zip code. So, you might do 14420. You also can do just 4-bedroom houses. You can draw a map around a neighborhood to focus on that neighborhood. That's what I use the most. I go into the map section of it. And when you're in there, the houses will pop up, and on the right-hand side, this is what it looks like. It just literally shows you the sales, and you can tell if it was MLS because it'll say MLS sale price, or you see that it says sale price. The sale price just means it didn't go on the MLS, right? It had a transaction. That one happened to close on 10/30/2020, never hit the MLS. So don't forget about these. I think we're so stuck on the MLS looking for comparables that we forget to go to the non-MLS stuff. And especially when you're in a neighborhood and you're going to sit with that seller, make sure you do your due diligence and you have those. And sometimes they don't even know it's sold. And I've had people say to me before, oh, we saw a moving truck there, but it was never for sale. People don't understand that, people sell homes without realtors, right? And I go, I know those crazy people, they probably could have gotten a lot more. And then when I show them, what things sold for in that neighborhood and what that house sold for, it is kind of interesting because you can see that they probably didn't get as much as they could have. And that's a nice security for me, especially if they're not listing today, for them to understand the value of getting it on the market, right? Versus just, their neighbor coming over and saying they have, a child that would love to buy their house. So you want to make sure that you get in front of that. So make sure that you're pulling the non-MLS stuff. I think if that's another thing that you don't normally do, start doing that going forward from today. Pulling comps for sellers. So list price still matters. Finding that right balance of list price, not too low and not too high, is the goal. And that is not an easy target, right? If anybody has listed houses lately, you know that. I like to show them when we're looking at the comps and what they sold for, we also pay attention to the list price, of course, right? So what does that do? It gives them a little bit of comfort. If I'm recommending a list price that they think is a little bit lower, it gives them the comfort level of knowing the market's going to take it, right? We all know that that's our discussion with everyone, especially right now. The market will take it. The market's going to dictate where that price is. Even if I put $1 on it, you're still going to get, the market dictating where the price is. But at that same time, I think there's a sensitivity from agents right now of trying not to list too low because you really want the qualified buyers, especially if you know about the price point that you're going to get to. You want to try to split the difference a bit and get a little bit closer to that. But don't forget that search parameters still matter. I have that conversation with my sellers all the time, right? If they say, well, we don't really want to list it at 179.9, how about 182? And I talk to them about, well, you're going to miss those buyers looking up to 180. Right? So don't forget the search parameters because that is a big part of who's going to be seeing the house when it hits their MLS search. The idea of strategic pricing to get multiple offers to pick your buyer. So yes, we can list it here, seller, but when you're pricing it at the point where we think we're going to finish, you're probably not going to get as much competition. You may get offers with home inspections versus not if you were a little bit lower and you had the competition. And the terms, you get to pick your buyer when you're in that situation of having multiple offers. You can look for the best financing. You can look for the best agents, quite honestly, right? Which agents have you worked with that are really strong, good agents and communicate well and are on all the details? You get to really make sure that that you've got the best offer in hand. I recently listed a house that I knew the backyard was limited, right? And so I didn't want to list it too low because I wasn't sure how many people would be able to get past that objection. Okay. So I wanted to make sure that I listed it at a price that I knew they would be happy if they got it. And of course, I'm hoping for more, right? But that's one that I definitely approached a little bit differently, where when I have a house that I know is going to be really, competitive and I know I'm going to get a lot of offers, it's a ranch with a couple acres or a great neighborhood with 4 bedrooms, whatever the case might be, I'm a little less stressed out about pricing it because I know the market will take it. But, in those homes where that there's something, that's going to be a little bit of a hiccup, you really have to make sure that you're pricing it appropriately. Consult with them about your why you think that they should list it at a certain price. I hear oftentimes agents say, well, I told them to list at that other number. And I always go, okay, so when you told them to list at that other number, did you tell them why? Did you, what did you get to? How hard did you fight for that? Because honestly, it hurts us too, right? When it's not priced right and competitively. And sometimes people don't listen to us. You can fight with them until they're blue in the face, but I don't know that everybody does a good enough job really sharing why. Why do you want to price it here? What's the benefit to you? And then discuss how the market is driving those best offers and the lack of readiness of some of the buyers to see those top prices already, right? So I know, the one that I just sold recently, I said, your neighbors are probably looking at that list price and thinking you're crazy, because nobody lists in that number, but they did well on it and they got the number. But you have to really make sure that you remember the buyer's mentality out there. And if it's hard for us to adjust pricing and we're real estate, professionals, imagine how hard it is for the buyers to adjust to the pricing as well.
Tina, Abigail McDonald has a question for you because
Okay.
I'm not really sure what it is. She wrote it in the
Sure.
chat. Abigail, can you unmute and ask? Abigail?
How about just listing it right on even so you catch people looking from 160 to 180 and those looking from 180 to 200?
So what are you saying? Where would I price that?
Instead of 179.9, because now you've cut out the people looking from 180 to 200.
I don't know a lot of buyers that put a bottom price on it. I'll be honest. Like I sometimes do, but it's a really low bottom price. Like I might want to work out, the homes that are really, in bad condition if they want something a little bit move-in ready. So I might do, 150 and up something. But I don't know. You guys can comment on that too with your buyers. Do you put a lot of lower search parameters on it?
I think what you're getting at, Abigail, and is the nines, like 149.9 and 179.9 or whatever it is. With today with the internet, everything is round numbers. So when you have a number that's like 179.9 as a price that you're looking for as your bottom number, and maybe they can go to 280.
Right.
You may be missing something that was if you're using the round numbers, you're not missing as many opportunities.
Okay.
If you're listing a house at 179.9, you're missing those people who their bottom number is 180.
Right.
That they're putting in the computer on the internet. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
So it's more of a problem on the listing side than on the buyer side.
Mm-hmm.
The buyer, if they use the 9, they may catch something.
Right.
Where if the listing, you may lose someone because of $100.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, that was Woolworth's thinking. 99 cents, less than $1. That's not really relevant today. If you type anything in, it's in round numbers.
Okay.
So think about that when you're listing properties.
Very good. Okay, and then one thing that I bring to my appointments, whether it's a seller or a buyer, is a spreadsheet from one of the houses that I listed, right? So this kind of tells the story. And I try to keep it in the price point if I can of around where they are. So if it's a $400,000 listing, I'm not going to bring a 150, scenario to them. But we all have listed houses in different levels. When I get offers in, I use a spreadsheet to kind of get my head around all the offers, quite honestly. And I have, offers 1 through 10. And I bring this sheet to the sellers with all the offers typically printed out with it in case they want more questions on it. And then I typically will highlight the top 2 or 3, right, that I think we should talk about and why. And then, sometimes people want to go through all 10 of them, and sometimes they just want to talk about the top 2 or 3. So, for example, this is a house I listed at 129.9. Agent and company I took out to protect the innocent through this one. But I do have that in there because it is important, right? Your reputation is important in who you are. So I use this to do 2 things, okay? And this was a really fun one because it was a young kid that was selling and his dad was sitting there. His dad's been through this process with us. He was there when we bought the house. So he's there when we're selling it, and he's, helping them come to the houses too when we're purchasing one. So we're sitting there as the seller. He hasn't been out there buying yet. And he listed his house because he was going to be contingent. So he's, getting himself to a non-contingent position. We listed it at 129.9. He sees all of the purchase prices going across and the escalation maxes and the increments above the highest and the final pricing and all the different terms and conditions. And it's a moment of joy, right? He paid probably 109 for this house not all that long ago. Okay. So, this is a great time for him. And so we're all excited. We get through this whole spreadsheet. He chooses the offer. The dad, everybody can't believe it. It's a moment of thrill. And so then I turned the table and I said, okay, so we're all super excited, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, so I go, I'm going to turn the table on you. And now you're a buyer. So now look at this through the buyer's eyes, because this is what you're competing against out there as well, right? You're going to be competing against people that are willing to put escalations in, willing to do these numbers, in the max, willing to go without a home inspection, willing to be this, willing to do that, putting this much down. And so, and I said, and by the way, you're buying in a 180 to 200 range. And I had a separate sheet of a house that I listed in that range to really show him what those increments look like in that point, right? Because it's not 1,000 over the highest, it's 5,000 over the highest. And so what was really good about that is, guess what I did? I caught him up really quickly on what he needs to do, right, to really be successful out there in competition. So, you have this data. If you're listing homes, if you aren't listing homes, get it from somebody in your office that does spreadsheets. They can get the names out of there and the address out of there, but it's helpful for them to really see what it is that's happening. And when you have a brand new buyer hitting the market, although it might scare them a little bit, you're doing them a favor because they're going to be dealing with this either way, right? Some people say to me, I'm not going to show them this very early because, they're going to go running. And I'm like, listen, my college student who's not even in the business knows what's going on out there. They know already that it's competitive. So you might as well arm them with data.
Could I ask a question?
Sure, Francis.
Fran Williams with the Lancaster office.
Yes.
Okay, so did you create this spreadsheet yourself?
I did.
Okay, and then recently I had multiple offers on something, and one of the other, an agent from another company had a summary sheet with hers, just the facts. And then I decided, and she had sent me a blank one by mistake. So, I kind of asked her if it was okay if I used that myself. And then what I did is I put each offer, printed them out, put them in a folder, then put the spreadsheet on the top.
Nice.
Because there was another agent from another company that had done a couple of things that I felt were unethical. First of all, they came back from a showing for her client, was supposedly doing a second showing, and there was an inspector up on the roof. He actually arrived when I was at the end of my showing, and my client looked at me and said, is there a second floor to this ranch? Because it sounded like Santa and his reindeers were up there.
Right.
And so that was without any permission. They had started, and then the man said, oh, no, it's just I said, you have a half-hour block right now. And he says, oh yeah, we'll be done. And I said, well, why don't you ask your inspector? And the guy said, no, I need an hour and a half. So I did call my clients, and then they said, no, go ahead, let them go ahead and do it. Well, when they came home, the buyer started chatting with the seller, and the agent came, and she was a veteran, and my client was a veteran, and all this other stuff was going on. And then after they left, he called me and said, they're going to buy my house, and he's going to buy my tractor and my snowblower. I said, you realize everyone else still has an opportunity to bid on this until tomorrow afternoon at 12. And so it was absolutely important not only to block out any names, so they're not saying, oh, this name is looks like it's somebody that's that came from Europe, or this person came from Asia or whatever. So instead, so they eliminated any kind of discrimination that way.
Yep.
I did want to eliminate any discrimination about a lot of things. And so, either one of the summary sheet didn't say whether or not somebody was a veteran that was buying it also.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then after we were all done, and he said, okay, so did that guy get it? And I said, no, they did not. Oh, at the last minute, then she sent an addendum saying that the buyer would pay $15,000 of the seller's closing costs. And I said, what's up with this? And my manager even said he felt that was a little disingenuous too. And I said to her, what's going on? Why not just say we're increasing our bid by 15,000? And what it is then my seller wouldn't have to pay commission on that. The sale price would keep the taxes down. It was really, to me, it wasn't ethical. I didn't feel that it was ethical. But at the end, when she said, did they get it? I said, no, they did not have the best offer, even with that little trick. Oh, okay. Because he got, actually 50,000 over the asking price. So, and a cash deal, because God forbid that that went through an appraiser. So I'm upset. I think the summary sheet is really something that we all need to be doing,
Mhm.
or a spreadsheet,
Yeah,
because that's the only way that we can ensure that are, no one is discriminating
yeah, I
against
think that's,
anything than the price and terms.
Well,
yeah,
thanks, Francis, for that. So it's important to remember that the summary sheets, the best reason to use them is fair housing.
mhm,
And if you number or letter like A, B, C, D, each of your contracts as they're coming in, it does help with fair housing because you're dealing with an anonymous source. You do have to provide the contracts if your seller wants to read them. They have the right to have them there and read them. We are all going to bump into unethical realtors. Don't mimic their behavior. Report it to your manager if you think something's untoward, and move on and do your business in the best and highest possible way that you can do your business. We have no control. We barely have control over ourselves. We have none over other people. But just do your business the best way you can. But fair housing has gotten stricter. So this document that Tina has, I have one. This will help you in that way.
yeah, I'll send out my spreadsheet as well and give you the notes in case someone doesn't have it. That is really helpful.
Can I ask
Okay,
a quick,
all right, so thank you for that. Thank you for the insight. And yep, it can get rough out there, no doubt. Some things to remember. So we're still talking about our sellers. They get one chance to make that first impression, make it their best. I think cleanliness and staging still matters most of the time. Sometimes we know we walk into a house. Actually, I get excited now when I walk into a house that smells strongly of a dog. I think, okay, I got a better chance of winning. So it's kind of funny. Maintenance is important for top dollar. Disclose what isn't working. The question I ask when I sit with my sellers is what's not working. And it was really funny because, they don't want to tell you what's not working, but you can get in front of it. The last thing you want is for the final walkthrough to be happening and the ice machine doesn't work on the fridge, right? And nobody told anybody that it doesn't work. And now you've got to fix it, because remember, appliances need to be in working order, whether or not, there was a home inspection or not. That's part of the contract. So I do ask those questions. What is not working, that typically will work. And so that's a good strategy, because then you can write it right into the private remarks and put it right on the contract so that you don't have a final walkthrough issue. And people don't want to tell you what's not working, in case you haven't noticed. They need to be flexible with showings, especially in this market with the amount of showings. When they get too limited, it can be tough. And when people are working from home a lot during this time too, so they want to restrict it. So I do try to get them very flexible, especially if I'm anticipating a ton of showings. I'm going to time it so that it's happening on a weekend. Sometimes I encourage them to go visit with a relative or something to give some extra time. And of course, share the COVID rules that are addressed in the background, that people are asking the questions and making sure that they're as safe as they can be coming through the house. What to expect when they're expecting. So I always explain the pros and cons of escalation clauses, delayed negotiations, and they get to decide whether they're using them, not you, the agent. I can't say that enough out there, right? It's how your sellers feel about it is what's most important, and your buyers, if they want to use an escalation clause. Prepare them for the abundance or lack of abundance of showings. We've talked about that. The decision to show the home during attorney approval period. How do they want to proceed? Do they want to continue to show it? Give them the pros and cons and options. If another offer comes in, how that's going to look, right? You're just preparing them for, what's to come. And the market should produce their highest value yet in our area. But if an offer doesn't come, right? And here's what I think I'm seeing a little bit. People that are listing at the top end, where they think it could go to, are now getting through delayed negotiation periods without an offer, right? So you can take it off of public and private remarks. You keep the attachment out there. But here's what you should be doing as the agent, not just removing it from the MLS, but reaching out to everybody that saw it, that didn't write an offer, because they might have been expecting an offer to come, right? So I don't like to wait. I want to, capitalize on that time period. So let's say we get to, Tuesday at 4, I have no offers in hand. That evening, I'm going to be calling, and I'm going to be letting the other people that showed the home know that we didn't get any offers. So if they would like to get in, probably not going to take long to sell with low inventory. That's their opportunity, because they may have been expecting it to go for our normal 30,000 over asking, and they didn't want to go there, right? Because they couldn't see it selling for 30,000 more than where you already have it, which is probably correct if you price it at the top end. So don't forget to do that. Reach out proactively and quickly. And you're really showing your value there too, by the way. And let the sellers know what you're doing, right? Let them know that you're reaching out and doing these things so they know that you're working on their behalf and you're not just sitting there waiting for, a call to come to show the house. And if no offers are there in that first week or so, you may need to adjust price a little quicker than we have in the past. Give it a little bit of time. Make sure you've uncovered, all of the rocks. You leave it out there active. That normally will cause the phone to ring anyways, because people are expecting to see it to go under contract. So now they've seen it sit out there a few days beyond that. So just make sure you're doing your due diligence, but don't panic. It's hard to know where things are going to sell at. That's the reason you're all sitting here today. And I'm trying to give you advice about everything and where to look and, how to make sure that you've, really done your due diligence on comps and understand everything in the background of comparables. But we don't always all get it right. So, you have to kind of have that strategy for what if I didn't get it right. So helping buyers make their best offer. It starts with the showing, right? And this goes to Fran's point, don't bring a home inspector if you haven't gotten permission from the seller, right? Because what is that going to do? It's potentially going to make them angry and they're not going to want to look at your offer, right? They're already going to be upset before, we've even started down the path. So be on time, follow the instructions, double check the doors, provide good feedback, and keep the agent posted on your buyer's interests. So, I always fill out the showing time, feedback form, but I usually will text the agent too. And, I keep in touch with my buyers through that period. If they decide they're not going to write, I ask them why, that information right back to that selling agent. So they know now why, because they probably said, oh, this one says they might write. And then if they've decided not to, you want to give them a little bit of feedback. So personally connect with those agents. Relationships matter in this. When I have 5 offers that we're deciding between, when it's an agent I've worked with, that's working with, that, that's going to make a difference because I'll be able to talk about that agent. Think outside the box on terms, the $0 per day rent back, HSA warranty. You've got to buy it lines up with that. That will cover the seller, and any of those issues while they're waiting for closing. So that's a nice one. I've hinted and joked about maybe buying pizzas for them for a year. Let's put that in our offer. We'll provide free pizza for a year, once a week or something. But have fun with that, right? Be crafty. I also think it's kind of fun. Like if I'm in my email, I'll write something, about like the disco ball in the basement has to stay. Like they have to have that because you never know. Like that could just be enough that makes them laugh and connect with your people, right? So try to have a little bit of a sense of humor in there. Highlight the terms of the offer when you email it. So I do usually say purchase price this, escalation to this, these terms, this, this deposit. I try to give them the highlights because they've got 20 offers maybe that they're looking through. So it's helpful to do that. Always ask for confirmation. As a manager, I get those calls sometimes from an agent that says, your agent didn't even look at my offer. And the reason is that they didn't follow back up with me because I told them I was going to write an offer, but I sent it to the wrong email. And now I didn't get a chance to bid. And I'm like, okay, that's on you when you had the mistake in the email. But 2, you need to get confirmation that they got you. How is that his job to reach back out to you to see if you're going to write? Now, I usually do that as a seller's agent, but not everybody does, especially when you have 20 offers coming at you. So make sure you get confirmation.
Especially when you're talking about offers where you might be getting 28 or 30. You may have had 40 people say, we're going to write an offer.
Yeah.
So they're not waiting for you. It is
Absolutely.
100% your responsibility
Absolutely.
to get back with that agent.
That's right. And then the pre-approval versus pre-qualification, that is on my spreadsheet, and I have pre-approved or pre-qualified because that's a really important distinction, right? So make sure that you're talking to your buyers about that and your sellers about the difference between those two things. Pre-approval means that they've gone through underwriting already, right? They've uncovered the, all the things that they need to look for. So that's a big difference versus pre-qualified. And if you have 2 people that are neck and neck, and close, and you've got one pre-approved and one pre-qualified, go with that pre-approved person every day. And if you have buyers that are working with lenders that aren't pre-approving, put them with lenders that are, because it can be the difference. It's been a difference for ones that I've chosen for sure. And then,
but just a fair housing thing. if you're asking one of your buyers to get pre-approved or pre-qualified, or if you're a listing agent and you're asking anyone to be pre-approved, pre-qualified, or proof of funds, guess what? You need to ask 100%. You
Yeah.
need to be fair, because someone can come back and say, well, they don't like people named Nanette, and so that's why they didn't accept my offer. You have to, or they made me get a pre-qualification or whatever you're doing for one, you must do for all. And fair housing is much more difficult than it has ever been. So keep that in mind. Anything you're doing for one, you've got to do for everyone.
And also manage your buyer's expectations about attorney approval period, so they're not blindsided, right? This is one of the big things out there that, you have to make sure that your buyers understand that there is that period of time that that it could be taken away from them, right? Try to protect them, try to make sure that you have a chance to get back in there. And if you're representing the seller, give that buyer a chance, number one, to get back into the mix, right? If they weren't competing the first time, or if they did compete and now it's, another offer, give them that chance to come in fighting. That's the best thing you can do for your seller. But there's so many times that buyers are blindsided because no one told them that, that contract can be disapproved. And I've gotten that call as a listing agent directly from a buyer before. And it's not a fun conversation, of course. They're ready to call the board on me because they think I'm unethical. And I have to teach them and consult them about, this is how the process works. And I'm sorry that your agent didn't share this with you. But, here's the number to the board. I've done everything, representing my seller accurately. And it's the seller's decision, by the way, right? And then I try to put them in the seller's shoes. So that's a really important thing to make sure you're doing out there. And I know it's not fun when they're all excited that they won to say, oh, and by the way, we have this little thing called attorney approval period, right? Nobody wants to be the, negative Nelly, but it's an important step.
Gina, Sam Scripture is asking, how important is the deposit? He has an example where a buyer is reluctant to go over $1,000.
Yeah.
And the first thing I'm going to say, Sam, and I'll shut up, is days of 100, 500, and $1,000 are gone. And I think I'll let Tina fill that in for you.
Yeah, I think you have to be a little bit aggressive on that for sure, because you have to know that could be the difference between your offer and somebody else's. It shows that you've got skin in the game, right? And that you're ready to come to the table. At the same time, you do have to have the realistic discussion with them. If they pull out for some reason late in the game, it's at risk, right? So it's a delicate balance between the two, but if they really want it, they got to fight for it. So, and showing them data helps. So if you've got, information, even from the offers that have come across your desk with all those deposits, similar to my spreadsheet, or you've written them with other people, you can talk about what's happening and what your other buyers are willing to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can use that spreadsheet as a sample of what a seller might be looking at and saying, which one would you pick?
Right, exactly.
And put it in there, have them stand in the other pair of shoes for a second.
Yep. With my buyers, I'm still looking at comparables. I'm not just letting them throw a number out there and hope for the best, right? I'm giving them as much as I can as far as the data that I have at the moment. And I'm calling on those pendings, right? I'm doing all the things like I would do if I were listing the house, quite honestly. And I know it's exhausting, especially when you're writing a lot of offers for people, but I call on the pendings. I try to get as much information to help them zero in on that number as best possible. And it's not easy in this market. And I also look in Realist again for anything that's sold off market. That won't show the competitiveness, but it's at least going to give them an idea. When your agent doesn't win, when your buyer doesn't win, ask the agent, if they can share some things about it, not just price, because most people right in that heat of that moment don't want to share price, but they're willing to tell you about additional terms, whether there were escalations or not. I track that a little bit for our agents, and I look at how many, came through with escalations and without. And there's really a trend now with a little bit less of those. People are just coming in at an aggressive number, right? And so that insight just helps your buyer. So ask as much as you can. Call agents a few weeks after on offers you didn't win, because then you can go back to your buyer and tell them what it sold for. That's going to help educate them quickly, because now they've been in the house, right? They didn't win it, and now they know what it sold for. So I kind of keep a running list of those houses, and I reach back out, and maybe even some of the houses we didn't write on, right? I want to know, what did they sell for too, because they saw them. So if it was one that they were close to writing on, I'm going to follow up on that too, just to help educate them. Still be a consultant, right? When I'll be in a home with somebody and I can feel the fatigue and they're ready to make an offer, and if it's got a super small bedroom, I'm going to talk about when they go to resell it someday, that's going to be a struggle for some people. This bedroom is probably not even really a bedroom because of the size of it, right? it's not at the 90 square feet that it should be. So, you know, I still want to be a consultant to them, and I don't want them to just get fatigued and make offers on things that, you know, that will be a challenge to potentially resell later, or a challenging location, other things. And my opinions of positives and negatives about the home, I'm always going to give that. So make sure you're still doing that with people and pointing out the windows are older, the this, the that. And I have actually started recommending a home inspection for those buyers that decided to go without one after the closing, just so they can learn about the home, right, and the maintenance. And I asked too if they want me to come, right? You know, I don't have to be there. Obviously, now they're the homeowner, but sometimes they like that. They're like, yeah, come on over, right? And so we'll go through the home inspection. A little slippery slope. What if something major is happening, right? But they made that decision, right? You know, they knew obviously there's risk associated with that, but I think it's good for them to at least be in front of anything that is happening that, you know, might be something that needs to be addressed, and just to get the general maintenance. And it gives you a little extra time with them too, if you haven't had enough already. So that's one thing that I've been doing recently. Managing expectations, you know, where to set their search limits. So if they're only able to go to 200 max, you know, they might want to be looking only up to 180, but now it does depend, right? Where are people pricing it? So I have told them, you know, I'm going to put you up to that max, but we really need to look at the house and the neighborhood and, you know, decide whether or not we think it's going to go higher than that. And I also have been helping, I feel like I'm a tax consultant now too, but I think it's important, right? For the times that it's assessed much lower than where they're going, I want them to have an idea of where those taxes are going to come back to potentially. I say, I can't control rate. I can't control your assessed value. I have no idea, you know, if things will change with either of those things, but worst case scenario, you know, you need to be aware. And I think the reason that it's important that we do this is so that they don't, when that day comes, they don't say, oh my God, I had no clue, right, that it could get to this point. So a quick and dirty way to do that is to look at the current assessed value and the current taxes, and then divide, you know, you kind of go at it backwards and you get to what is the rate that was used, and that's the tax rate. So for a $175,000 house, and we'll just take the town and county portion of it at 3,400, you take the 3,400 in taxes and you divide it by 175.0. So you can tell we took the zeros out, right? It's just the 175 number. That's the rate, 19.43. Now you can take that rate and multiply it by, if they offered 225 for that house, by the 225, and it gives you a roundabout figure. Nobody should take that number to the bank, but it's enough to help them understand what could change with taxes. That's been a really good conversation to have with people, and it really does help them decide on whether they want to go to a certain number on the house, right? Because they want, you know, to understand what their taxes will be. There's also rate sheets out there for, you know, town and county and school rates you can get to. You know, there's lots of different ones. I'm a math person, so I like to be in the here and now with the math. How many offers might it take and why? You know, and we talk through that so that they're ready for that and they don't think they're going to win on the first one, like we said. And then the spreadsheets. I told you I share those with my buyers just as much as my sellers, probably even more sometimes, because I really want them to know what the market looks like. Stay in tune, right? Go to your branch sales meetings to get the latest pulse on the market.
Tina, Betty has a question.
Oh, sure.
Betty?
Am I on mute? Am I on
You
mute?
are, there you are.
Okay.
I came in under Sandy, as you can see, Maggie, but I have a suggestion that I tried and it really worked with. If you don't want to get into that kind of stuff, and I don't with the assessment, I have suggested that my client call the town and find out when is their next assessment period, because we all know that if you close in June of this year or July or whatever, and it doesn't reassess, that is not reassessing till 2023, those taxes are not going to change.
Yep.
And that was very, very helpful to a client who thought that he was going to go, his taxes were going to go sky high as soon as he closed on his property.
Right, exactly. That's a great point. And I do usually tell them, just because the house closes, it doesn't mean your taxes change the next day. You know, it depends on the timing of the town. And I do the same thing. I give them that guidance of contacting the town.
In doing that, I found out that Victor is not going to reassess until 2023, if they do it then, she said.
Yeah, good. All right, so there you go. Now you've got information and data, right? We talked about deposit amounts. We've talked about, you know, looking at when you're in these sales meetings and talking about different things, cash versus financing, down payments, right? What are we seeing out there? Home inspections, inventory that's coming soon. Stay in tune with your brand, right? It can only help. And what does it take to be successful in writing the winning offer? It's nice when people share some of their tips, right? How are they getting there? What are they doing? I have an agent in my office that has gotten a couple contingent homes under contract recently that aren't even on the market. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? How are you doing it? And she's digging into the inventory. She's looking for things that have been out there longer than 30 days, right? She's, really, really uncovering every rock and trying to find those houses for her people. So, and it's in the outskirts, not so much in Monroe County, but still, right? She's doing the due diligence to help her people. And then with your buyers, why shouldn't they wait to buy is another, important message. So prices are not going to be, most likely not going to go down. They may increase at a more normal rate or even stay flat, but most likely will not go down. And we might start to see some normal increases coming out of it. Interest rates are phenomenal, right? That's always a great message to your buyers. And your loan rep can illustrate that even at a higher sale price with interest rates being so much lower, if you take that down the road about 15 years or even 10 years, it's going to break even almost of where you would have been if the rate was high and the price was low. These are conversations that are important, right? To understand the dynamics of. So you all have your loan reps that you work with. Ask that question, take that bullet and say, show me how that works. Show me what that would look like for my buyer who's been struggling to pay 200, even though, he was a 180 buyer at higher rates, right? Help me understand how to get that point across to him that the lower rate and the higher price end up at a break-even point after a certain number of years because you paid so much into principal and your interest is lower. So that's just a little bit of a nice tip for sure. And it's even more helpful to have your buyer talk directly to the loan rep about that, right? Then they're not hearing it through you. So sit in on that meeting or be in on that conversation, but send them in that direction to understand that dynamic. And I am big on telling, people that are saying, I'm just going to wait, I'm just going to do this. And while I'm waiting for prices to adjust, you're going to be putting money into your house, right? So don't you want to put it into the next house that you really want to be in versus the house that you're trying to get out of? And I'm actually in that boat because we probably are only in our house for about 5 more years and we're about to spend $20,000 plus on a master bathroom. I don't really want to do it. I wish I was in the next house to do it, but we don't know where we want to go yet. So, if they're waiting because of prices, don't wait. Honestly, they want to be in that next home so that they can put the improvements into there because your house is going to need something. We're homeowners, right? We know it's a constant grind on putting stuff into your home. What to avoid, please stop doing escalations with no max if you're a no max escalator out there. So I have agents that call me and it's really a fun conversation because they'll say, okay, so I got these 3 offers and this one's at no max and this one's at this and this one's at this. And I say, okay, so you're no max buyer. So they have $1 million and they stop right in their tracks. And I go, well, what does their pre-approval say? What's the number on their pre-approval? And then they're like, oh, it's this number. I go, okay. So you need to call the agent back and say, is that their max? Is that the most they can go to on a pre-approval, right? What is the real max and show me the money, just like we would with any other number, right? You have to make sure that those top numbers are covered because if you're about to choose that one with no max, you don't want to be surprised, 2 weeks in when they can't afford it. So stop doing no max. That one really bothers me. Being confrontation or holding a grudge if your buyer is not selected. People remember that. I can give you names of agents who have been mad at me because their buyer wasn't selected and mad at me for the decisions that my sellers made. It's not my choice. Don't be mad at me. So, we all have to play in the same field. So make sure that, this is all part of being the winning bid. You want to make sure they have good relationships out there, of course. They aren't going to want to work with you in the future if you're not nice to them. I don't forget names of people who aren't nice to me. Don't assume that they picked another buyer of their own dual agent. And if it was their own buyer, remember that ultimately the seller is selecting the winning bid. So I hear that sometimes too. It had to be their own buyer, they made that person select them. They're still presenting offers. So don't assume those things. Our reputation's at line, right? Leaving any term or condition verbal. I was down to the wire on getting offers in, and I had one person who said, oh, they've changed their mind and they've decided to do this. And I said, okay, I need that in writing. And he never got it to me in writing. And guess what? not part of the offer then, right? So make sure that it's in writing. I'm not sharing anything verbal with anyone. So you shouldn't either. You should make sure that it's in writing. Make sure your paperwork is all together, right? Otherwise, you're showing a lack of attention to detail, missing paperwork, missing items on your paperwork. I get offers without things filled in, and I really just want to put them in the trash. So make sure they're complete. Data gathering, how are we doing on time? A little bit after 2. All right, so using data to consult your clients. This is one more of those graphs from Matrix. You can pull something like this right out of Matrix, and this is in the market reporting section. So median sale price, that tells the story, right? You just get stuff out there right in front of your people so that they can see what's happening in our market and how prices are trending. These are the ones that come out from Monroe County. So when you get into Matrix, these reports are available as well. You can see median sale price, and I can give a little bit of instructions when I forward my slides out to you guys on a couple of these and how to get there. It's always helpful to have this step-by-step, so I'll walk you through that. Median sale price and where it is in March versus where it is year to date. You can see this is live, from a few months ago, live data that I pull from my sales meetings, and I talk about we're at a 13% increase in the month of March. Year to date, we're at 12%. So we're, trending even higher in March. Excuse me. How are we doing on listings? How are we doing on inventory? You can see that minus 17%, for year to date. Now the year to date or the year over year is going to be a little bit less important right now because of COVID, right? We're now comparing. In these months, we're comparing COVID in the mix. So it's going to be a little bit skewed when we look at year over year. So don't forget that as well, where we were last April and May, right? This is something that I provide out there. I give this to my agents. It's called the at a glance. These are contracts that come across my desk, and it gives them an idea of list price to sale price ratios and what's the market looking like right now. And we're a Penfield office, but obviously we sell all over the place. Right, we're not just in Penfield, so we're selling some things in Walworth and Victor and other areas. So this is a nice one to put in front of the buyers that are sitting there and the sellers, but the buyers that are saying I'm never going to write over list price. Well, this is what the market's doing. The orange is the sale price, the blue below it is the list price, and you can see almost every single line has a blue that's under a orange, right? Everything is selling. Most everything is selling over asking price. There's a few exceptions in there, but it's pretty close, right? Just data. And this type of list price to sale price ratio you can also get from Matrix. These are out there for you to be able to share. Not this particular slide, but the percentages are out there for you to share. And remember, it's an average. Okay, so some homes are selling for less and some are selling for more, and the why hasn't changed. It's about price, condition, location, right? It's always going to be about price, condition, location. You're going to have hotter areas. You're going to have areas that have more inventory or less inventory. Condition is, going to matter to a certain extent, and pricing is mattering as well, where you price it and where you hit the target. And are you their trusted consultant is where we're going to wrap up before the Q&A. So with your current buyer pipeline, be patient. You still want them to love their home. Look under the rocks. I think I mentioned that a few times. Has it been on the market for a little while? Look into expireds that haven't relisted. That's a fun one I have a few agents that are very good at that, right? And they're going after some of those that haven't relisted and talking to those people. And sometimes they're doing it off MLS with their buyer because guess what? Nobody's telling them what their house is worth now. So they remember their old list price. And then they're like, oh, you're going to pay me $10,000 more than what I was going to get, a year ago. Okay. And, they're ready to roll. So make sure you're paying attention to those. Are they not on the market yet? But maybe, where's their favorite neighborhoods? Your buyer, get those neighborhoods from your buyers and try to, solicit some people because you actually do have a buyer for that neighborhood. So you're going to try to go after it. And then someone in your sphere that may want to sell off market without the hassle for a good price. So, you've got lots of options out there in addition to what's in the MLS to think about. And with your current seller pipeline, are you talking about options available if they're worried about where to go? We talked about that a little earlier. What if I don't get the number I'm hoping for? Is anybody having that conversation with their sellers, their potential sellers? What if I don't get the number? Do I have to take an offer if it's, over asking and I don't really want to be at that low amount over asking? It's their choice. They don't have to accept an offer. They're the seller, right? not that you want to run around listing houses where people aren't motivated. I will start with that. Make sure there's some motivation in there. And the conversation that I have with people is, yep, it's a great market, but don't forget that you're also going to be buying a house in this market, right? So, you know, I'm making sure they see that full picture. It's great that you're going to get X for your house, but don't forget you're paying Y for the one you're going into, you know, at the same time. So make sure that, you know, they're being realistic. Do they understand the value that you're providing, right? We're getting more and more pushback on commission. I'm feeling it as well, right? I get it all the time. Lately, it seems like, you know, boy, that sold in a day. We still have to pay you that amount? You know, what are you doing now for me? And, you know, I remind them of everything that I've done for them to get to that point, right? Because it's not just I walked in and, you know, put a sign in the yard, and there's still ways to go to get to the finish line. So remind them of your value.
It can help to provide them at the listing appointment with a process, where you start and what all of the activities that happen to closing,
Yeah.
and make sure that you're communicating with them weekly. And sometimes your communication may be, hey, Ken, this is Maggie from Howard Hanna. I just want to let you know nothing's happening, but I touched base with your attorney, I touched base with your loan officer, and
Yep.
everything's on track.
Absolutely.
And that might be your whole contact. I'm
Yep.
telling you to tell you nothing's going on, but everything's on track.
Yeah, because they're worried in the background. So yeah, keep them up to date. No news is not good news. No news scares them, quite honestly, right? And with your sphere, are you staying in front of your sphere? Create a regular review process with people on the value of their home. It's their biggest financial asset, right? So keep them up to date on what that value is. And what better time than now? You're coming in, right? You're coming in with good news. Here's what your asset is worth. So pick a few people per week to reach out to proactively and stick to it, and let them know what their house is worth. If they're waiting to do the updates needed to sell, they may not know that it may not be necessary to do those updates. So we'll start there, right? Every house certainly doesn't need to be updated today. And the wait time on renovations and updates are long and they're expensive, right? So, you know, we signed our contract for our bathroom March 10th, I think, or something close to that. And it's being done in September. That's depressing because I had to pay a quarter of it. And that money just went out the door. And I'm like, I got nothing to show for it, right? Until September. So it's a long, long period to get to the renovations. Become their resource for all things home related. So they think of you, right? So that they pick up the phone and call you. So get those, you know, list of, you know, contractors to them, whatever you need to do to make sure that you stay in front of them. And keep the data in front of them. Become their go-to person. If you're not good at data, work with your manager. Call me. I'll help you be good at data, right? You want to make sure that they're updated on what's happening out there. Okay, so that was a lot. We packed it in. I'm always happy when I actually get to it before the end time. So we'll open it up to general Q&A.
Diane had a question
Okay.
earlier about what to include with a purchase offer. She wondered if, should she be, as a buyer's agent, should she be including her fair housing documentation and her agency disclosure?
So the only time I do an agency disclosure on a buyer when I'm writing as a buyer is when it's going to be dual agency. So if something's switched in there, right? Dual with designated sales agents, that's when I put it in. Normally, I don't provide them my agency, nor do I provide them my fair housing when I send off an offer.
So
That's the right answer, Maggie.
That is the right answer. You don't have to provide them. You have them. And if anyone has a question about that, you could produce it if you needed to.
Right.
I was prompted to ask that question under Tina's category of, you know, make sure you have everything included. So many other agents include them, even though I know that it's not part of the contract and I have them on file. I feel like they might view me as missing documents. And I'm,
right.
You know, so what, do you fall to that?
So one of the things you should be doing is if also dual agency, you should be, if you are writing a purchase contract for another Howard Hanna agent, you should have advanced informed consent of dual agency with designated sales agent. That should be included with that contract because you are working for the same broker. So it is a dual agency. It's just a different style of dual agency, right? You're not representing both parties, but you are representing the same broker. So I would include it in either dual agency or dual agency with designated sales agent.
And I don't think that a seller's agent should see that as missing because what are they doing with it anyway, right? They're not, and if they're signing it, they shouldn't be signing it. So
yeah, it's only the dual with designated or the dual.
Yeah.
that it should be there.
But I understand where you're coming from. They're like, how come this one's only 12 pages and the rest of them are 17? I get it.
Good question, though.
Mhm.
Oh, but you guys all know agency disclosure, whether or not you ever close, you need to keep those on file. Those are your responsibility, and keep them for a long time. Long
We got a
time.
lot of questions over there, at least a lot in the chat box. Anything
Oh,
else?
I was typing a lot I was
Okay.
commenting and answering some things.
Sure. Oh, good. You were.
Chuck is asking, what do you recommend to dispute a large tax increase?
So if you're going to the assessor, you mean? Is that what he means by large tax increase? Right?
Yeah. So friends of ours, they have a house they own a house that just got assessed really high.
Mhm.
So what could we do as a realtor to
Yeah.
help them?
Yeah, so you're going to pull comparables just like you would. You're going to look at what's out there, right, that you could put into their hands. And just like anything else, if I'm coming with a buyer, I always want to see the comparables that are lower. If I'm representing the seller, I want to see the comparables that are on the higher end. So you can try, with the lower comparable ones. It's hard when they've just purchased it. I'll put that out there too, right? If they've just purchased it and they have a sale price, how are you going to fight against that? Exactly. That one's a tough one, right? So if it's that situation, it'll be a little bit harder for sure. If you really feel like it's too high, they could also hire an appraiser, right, to come to the house and do an appraisal. It's like $100, $150 probably for that type of an appraisal. So that could help, but they may be surprised at what it's worth. If anything else, it'll help them see that it's the right number.
Yeah.
Right?
Also, don't encourage them to lower an appraisal if it's going to help them later in the future.
Yeah. How long are they
going
to be there? Yeah, that's the question.
Sometimes they cut their own nose to spite their face.
Yeah.
Sam is asking, so he's asking about the spreadsheet and the actual purchase offers, and are you forwarding those to sellers? Me personally, Sam, I am taking that spreadsheet and those purchase offers with me in person.
Correct. Yeah.
If I can't, and hopefully we're past the point where we can't be socially distant and safe, wear masks and be 6 feet apart. I've never had a seller ask for the contracts, but I have them.
Mm-hmm.
But I take the spreadsheet and we go over the spreadsheet. I've never had anybody who wanted to read them all.
Yeah, especially when there's 20 of them, right?
When there's one, they might, but when
Yeah.
there's 20 of them, they don't want to read them. They're asking you for the details, and if it's detailed enough, you should be fine.
Yeah.
Mine are pretty detailed.
Yeah, mine are very detailed. There's not much. And what's not on there, I have an other section too. So if there's anything else that's written in there, like first right of refusal or, whatever they're putting in there that's outside the normal, the normal categories, I've got an other category. So they're there in there.
Yeah. Tina and I both have very detailed spreadsheets.
Yes, we do.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have a seller who believes that because of the market and what's been selling around and the lack of inventory in my area, that their house is worth way more than what it's going to sell for, and they won't budge.
Okay.
So now they've decided to interview other agents and see what they have to say about a selling price.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that? I mean, other than
Yeah, it's a
feel
great
like you've
question,
been
Vivian.
beat up?
Yeah. So what I usually do when I sit with a seller, especially when I know I'm competing, but even when I don't, because you never know when you're competing, right? So
I've done 5 other businesses with this couple and their family. I've been their agent. I've done 5 other deals.
Yeah, I
And
know.
then they want, but I'm going to say they want probably 20,000 more than what it's going to sell for.
Right.
And
So what
because I can't produce that 20,000, they're going to look at other agents.
Right. What I usually do when I come in is I show them the comps in detail, right? The pictures of the comps, so they're going to be comfortable with it. And I always say to them, if you're talking to other agents as well, just recognize that some agents are excited to just have a listing, right? And they're going to list it at whatever price that you want to put it at. So if they're telling you that your number is realistic, you need to see the evidence that supports that. And they can't usually produce the evidence that supports that, right? We all know that. We know there's agents that'll come in at a number and this is their number and sellers are thrilled to see it and then it sits on the market, right? So, yeah.
And I said to them, if there's other agents out there that are going to get you the price you think you want, where have they been? Why haven't
Yeah.
they brought buyers to us?
Right. And I think the message too is that the market is going to drive the best price. It really is, right? So you have to trust in it. Anytime more than now, it's totally, valid to say that the market is going to take you to your best price, the best that you're going to get for it. Your first offer is your best offer. We say that, and that's a very true thing. So
We had an offer
Yeah.
today. Within a day, we had an offer.
Yeah.
And I said that to him, your first offer is usually your best offer.
Yeah. Yeah.
They refused the offer. They
Yep.
countered it back at 30,000 more than what the offer
Oh
was.
my gosh.
And and they just walked away.
Yeah. Yep, I know. And so our stories help, right? I like to talk about our stories and people that thought they'd get more with the next one. So whenever I go through a painful experience like that, Vivian, I just think, what's one more story, right? One more time I can talk about what can happen, right? If you push the envelope too far. I remember this one couple that we listed it. They had an agent relative that lived in Arizona that was telling them to counter, and it was November, and I was like, yeah, Arizona in November is quite different than Rochester, New York in November. I'm telling you, they could walk, and they said, well, they're not going to walk if they don't want to, do that number. They'll just come back at the original one. And I said, they don't always. You just need to know that's a risk, right? And what happened? They got insulted by the counter, and they walked, and they ended up getting 10,000 less, a month later. So those are the stories that are painful while they're happening, but you can share them. And sometimes people need to learn that lesson the hard way, unfortunately.
And it can't help you as an agent as a listing agent and a buyer's agent to start with your buyers and with your sellers and say, when we get to a point where we're making offers or we're working with offers, a deal never dies in my lap. So I don't care if they offer you a pig and a goat, we're going to counter them. We may counter them right back at list price, but we're going to counter until it dies. And I say the same to my buyers. If they come back and they shoot right back up to where they were, we're just going to counter them again. It's not going to die in our lap. We're going to push it until it can't go any further.
Yeah.
And then feel free to call that agent where it's 30,000 and say, if your people really want the house, that the first buyer often makes the best deal. I know that. Please come back with another offer. Don't chicken out. Don't chicken out. Come on back. But if they don't want it, guess what, Viv? They weren't going to buy the house anyway.
Well, they did. They didn't buy the house, no, but they did come back. They would have gone 16 more, but my seller wasn't willing to come down.
No, I know. Yep. It's hard, right? We
One
do the
of those
best we can.
situations where they just think that because the neighborhood is a very mixed neighborhood. So you don't have one type of house in this neighborhood.
So we have a lot of those neighborhoods.
Yeah. And so they're looking at a house down the street that is like maybe 6 years old, and theirs is 30 years old, and it sold for maybe say 350. So they think that, okay, well, I can get 300. Well, that they can't, because their house is not like that house.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just have to point it out to the best of your ability of why the house is different. And it's exhausting. This is not an easy job.
It's not an easy job. So Tony asks, if a buyer comes back second and it's usually lower, why should they spend the same amount of money if no one else did? Tony Connors, do you want to explain that?
I've just found over the years that I've said to my seller, the first offer is usually the highest, and they say, yeah, but that's easy. And I say, but if you don't get any offers and you want that buyer to come back, they probably will come back at a lower price because you didn't take it the first time and nobody else offered you. So why should they pay you the top dollar?
Absolutely. My husband is a reverse negotiator. Like if he wants something and he offers something and they come back with a counter, he goes lower. He's like, oh, okay, I'm going to go $100 lower then.
Yeah, Brian Buffini says, I can't counter an offer I don't ever receive.
Yeah.
Which I think is a great line.
Yeah,
Don, did you have something to add? You went away, your hand was raised. You wanted to share something, and I don't know if you're still there or not. Okay, I tried. Let's see. Anybody else have any other questions?
Well, if you have a very difficult seller, perhaps, which we all have, perhaps suggesting that they hire an appraiser.
Absolutely.
And they're probably going to listen to what the appraiser.
That's a good one, Abigail. I've done that before with one, if it expired with a different agent and I walk in and they're like, but your number's 50, 20,000 lower. Like, how can it be there? And they don't believe me. I will bring in them. I'll be like, you know what, we can get a third party opinion if you want. Right. And they're like, sure. And these days it might be a little bit harder. Back in the day, that was a little easier to get a good concrete number on a house, right? It's got to be a little trickier for them these days with the market, but that's a great suggestion. So thank you for that. All right. Anybody
I
else?
think you answered all the questions they have, or they're so overwhelmed they don't know what to ask. I'm not sure which one it is.
I always pack it full of a lot of content. I'm sorry.
Have you ever dealt with land? It's a very different animal.
I have, yeah.
Doing comparables, it just,
Yeah.
because the acreage makes a lot of difference, whether it's front footage or it's.
Absolutely.
Just a
Yeah, I definitely, when I do comparables on land, I do try to look at, is it approved or not approved? Is it, higher? And I do the acreage kind of, if it's a 25 acre parcel, I'm not going to compare it to a price per acre of a 5 acre parcel, right? So there's a lot of things, to look for in there for sure. Location, of course, is going to matter. Frontage matters, right? It is definitely a different beast with land to try to really make an apples to apples comparison. It can be tough, but you can get to a general in those different size acres, a general price per acre, and then you can get into, okay, but they had more frontage, right? Even though they had the same amount of, land, or it was certainly if it's wetlands, right? That's going to make a big impact on it as well. And we should make sure we do our due diligence on wetlands. Not enough agents even know what that is, but you should contact the water and soil, places that are in the county that you're selling it in to find out if it's wetlands or not. If they're buying or selling, you should know that. So yeah, it's trickier with land, no doubt.
I have a question. Before, if you sold a house with 20 acres, the banks only really considered 5. Is that still the rule of thumb or no?
When you say they only consider 5, when they're doing appraisal, when they're comparing it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a good question. This market has been so strong that it seems like a non-issue at this time. I think it used to be more of an issue, though. You're right, Tony, because I do remember that from
I think that might vary with the smaller banks that do portfolio loans over the bigger banks.
Yeah, like a CNB.
Yeah,
right.
Or even like a community bank, or
yeah,
some of those offbeat little places who we rely on for some of those weird deals, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you need to have a body of loan officers to help you get the best program for your buyers.
Absolutely,
because not every bank has every program, and not every bank will do portfolio. Donna, you're back. Do you have something you wanted to share or say?
Yeah, I'm sorry that I had to go away. In fact, I've got an agent in my office who's dealing with a multiple offer situation as a listing agent. So I had something to say, and it was actually born true out of the conversation that I just had with my agent. I think it's very, very important to understand the minutia and the navigation through multiple offers with escalation clauses, and the grid that Tina and Maggie presented today is invaluable in that respect. And I knew that the class would be spectacular. So thank you, Tina and Maggie. All of that being said, we tend to forget who we are as professionals. We are negotiators. Okay, and we get so jammed up in the escalation clause process and who leverages where in the grid, and then boom, 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 boom. You are so focused on that that you forget the fact that you can say poof with the escalation clause. Yep. You were under no obligation as the listing agent to accept it. And you need to make sure that you understand that, so that you can explain it to your seller, number one. Number two, if you are in receipt of an offer that has no cap on the escalation, and if you guys talked about this before, shut me up. You did?
Okay. We did.
It's really important to get the number from the buyer's agent. Because this just happened in the situation with my agent in my office right now. I told her, you need the number because you very well may need that number as proof of the competitive offer if
Yeah.
you're going to go with another offer.
Well, we specifically, Don, talked about they need a backup anyways to prove that they can pay unlimited, right? So number one, you need to show me where your no max is, because you might be saying no max because it's listed at 170 and you assume it's not going to go over 230, but maybe it will, right? So
Right.
where is your where's your max pre-approval or pre-qualification is the beginning of that? Or if you're cash, where's, what's the max amount of funds that you have?
Absolutely. And again, I always say in the classes that I teach, never let your business be dictated by the incompetence of another.
Yeah, you're exactly
Don't go down that rabbit hole of incompetence.
right.
Simply because you've got a Yahoo brand new agent from Podunk Realty who
Mhm.
thinks that they know exactly what they're doing and they're just
Yeah.
going to throw an open casket to this
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
You need to hone that in, but try
Yeah.
to remember that you absolutely have the ability to negotiate. You don't have to be
Mhm.
locked into the escalation.
You're
If
absolutely
you feel that the negotiation is going to be better for your client, number one, and number two, you've explained it to your client and you explained to your client that there's always a risk, that we
Yeah.
could go back to the agent and say, hey, forget about the escalation. Here's the number. You can buy it at this number.
Yep.
And as long as your client is okay with that, you can do that.
Yeah, I've seen people walk away from cash deals and take the really high, other one that's conventional. I'm like, you can always counter the cash person too, right? Like you said, we still can negotiate. You don't have to just abide by that spreadsheet and that's the end of it. You
Right.
take it from, you can always counter. You can always do things. You're representing your seller, right? So don't forget that. It's all about the seller at the end of the day and what's
That's right.
best.
Excellent class.
And
Thank you.
remember, you can't negotiate if you're not the local expert. So what are houses selling for? It goes back to those numbers that Tina showed you in the beginning. First of all, you got to get into houses, either virtually or physically get into houses to know what your market looks like. What's the condition of the houses and where they're selling. Then you need to have conversations with the other agent, whether you're the buyer's agent or listing agent, you need to be having conversations. You need to be an open book as far as asking questions and getting answers and talking to people so they'll talk to you. As a listing agent, don't forget your confidentiality. What
Yeah.
can't you say? Don't
Yeah.
tell what a sold price is until you've closed. Why? If the deal falls apart, you've put your seller in a weaker position.
Right.
As a
Well,
buyer's
and I
agent,
ask
go ahead and
myself-
ask.
Yes, I ask my sellers, are you comfortable with me sharing, right? It's their decision at the end of the day, because you don't want to be in that position of where you've shared. It's a small community, right? Somebody finds out before you're through attorney approval or through, home inspection or mortgage commitment. You want to make sure you have their permission. Everything that you do is their decision. That's probably the main theme of our industry that you have to remember, right?
We're cab drivers. You take them where they need to go, but we give them information and hope that they listen to us, which they don't always. Any other questions? Thank you, Tina.
Meg-
Oh, sorry,
Meg,
Sandy. Go
I'm sorry. Well, I don't know if anyone else has come across this, but I've had a couple deals. My buyers have gotten their offers accepted because of the escalation clause.
Mhm.
And when I've been supplied the competing offer, it just looks questionable to me.
Mm.
So
I'm sorry
I
to
don't
hear
know
that.
how to, I mean, at one time the agent only supplied me like 4 pages. And
Yeah.
I told him I needed the complete offer.
Yeah.
And the other one was like an agent that was in the same office as the listing agent.
So you wondered if it drove it up. So I try to think the best of people, but here's how you can mitigate it. If you have somebody that says, I'm only going to give you a few pages of it because they're not comfortable with you having other information, have them send it directly to your person's attorney, right? Then it's
Okay.
out of the hands of agents so they can get it to them if they want to protect the innocent on names or, who they're working with, if they're not comfortable with you having their buyer information. But they should have a pre-approval. They should, or a pre-qualification, one of the other proof of funds of something, right? So that should mitigate, someone just back of the envelope trying to do it. And I really do try to think the best of people. I can't imagine that, someone would do that. But it's real estate. So, you just want as much proof as you can. And if they're not willing to provide the full document, get the attorney involved. And get it.
Remember, as a listing agent, when you're providing those proof contracts, that you're redacting the client's name and personal
Right.
information, but that the other elements are there. But always get your attorney involved. That's what they're there for.
Yeah. Right.
This is a great opportunity to have your attorney look over and figure out what's right, because it's not just the money, it's the terms. So and they're complicated. And a lot of agents really don't know how to execute an escalation clause. They don't know how to read them, and they
Right.
don't do it right. So it's important to have the attorneys involved and get you out of it so you can maintain those relationships, because those are so
Yeah.
important.
It's not always necessarily who's right or who's wrong.
Mhm.
It's whose understanding matters.
Right.
So,
You're right.
I mean, this escalation clause language has quote unquote escalated or evolved over the years. I believe that the Howard Hanna's most current one is okay. It's not as precise as I would like it to be. Food for thought. And I had this conversation with my own agent today. When you are the listing agent in receipt of offers with escalation clauses, even with a Howard Hanna escalation clause as written, if I were the listing agent, I would absolutely be calling every buyer's agent and I would be asking them for their definition of purchase price in terms of competitive purchase price, because there are listing agents and buyer's agents that will interpret that word differently. And the last thing that you want to do as a listing agent is give, let's say, Nils Minor the heads up to say, congratulations, you have prevailed. And then I use Tina Visconte's offer as proof of the offer. And he comes back and he says to me, well, no. We didn't buy the house for 180. We bought the house for 165.
Right. They're
You don't
looking
want
at
to have,
purchase price.
you don't want to have that misunderstanding at that time. Okay, you can't presume that your definition of purchase price or competitive purchase price is the buyer's agent's definition of purchase price or competitive purchase price. I would make sure that you have that conversation beforehand. It would appear that it would make sense that most people would say, well, of course we mean inclusive of escalation and cap, but not all buyer's agents understand that. And
not all attorneys understand that.
Not all attorneys understand that. And you don't want to set your seller up for the wrong expectation in terms of what they're getting for the house if you haven't already done your due diligence to call the agents directly. Even if they don't offer you the courtesy of calling you or texting you at the very least to let you know that they've sent an offer to you and you're on your way to your client's house to present offers at 3:30 in the afternoon, and they send you an email with an offer and don't even tell you about it. I'm going on a rant, but you understand my point.
No, we talked about that too. Getting confirmation when you send an offer, communication, not just send it and walk on your day. And when you're representing the seller, please call all the people that didn't win. I know it's a little tiring to call 20 people, but you should really have a conversation with people and let them know, right? That the text messages, the emails, it's not enough, right? Our job is to help everybody in this industry, and the more we can help, the better, right? So you should call and let them know that you didn't get it.
Totally.
Did you guys talk about why you go back to all of the buyers from a fair housing standpoint if the first offer falls apart?
We've talked about if you do one thing for one person, you got to do it for everyone.
The other reason that you do it is not just for fair housing. Don't presume. Okay, I just had this conversation with my agent. Got a property listed for $140,000. She got an offer for $135,000, and she's like, "Well, that's going nowhere." I'm like, "Okay, maybe right now." I said, "But if you have 7 offers on this house, and your prevailing offer is for $20,000 over asking price, and then that deal falls apart after acceptance and before attorney approval, don't go back to just this next highest one." Don't presume things that may or may not be in play that could impact the opportunity for your seller.
You're working for them.
You need to go back to all of them because you don't know what the mindset is of that buyer that went in lower than asking price. You can't presume that they'll never come up.
Right.
This could be the 5th house that they've lost. And if they realize that they're getting a second bite at the apple, they could go much higher. So you always have to cover your bases.
Yeah, we know our buyers that didn't go high enough that ended up, regretting it, right? So if they get a second shot at that, they're gonna go higher potentially. So it's a really great point. Thanks for that one.
Anything else? Well, everybody, thank you so much for coming today. Tina, thank you. Always an excellent job. I appreciate you so much.
Great class, Tina.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you.
Just do. So we will share everything with you, and the video will be posted at New Hanover University, but not today. Because it's my birthday and I'm not doing it today.
Good enough reason.
Happy birthday.
All right,
Thanks,
bye.
Alba.
Happy
And
birthday, Maggie.
thanks, Tina.
Happy birthday,
And I,
happy birthday, Maggie.
thanks, Tony.
Okay, will we be getting the grids?
Yeah, we'll send you the spreadsheet, we'll send you the PowerPoint, and the video will be posted in New Hannah University. If you haven't been to New Hannah U, it's on your Go Hannah dashboard under Training and Education, New Hannah University. Go in, check it out. It's broken everything down to really short videos. Yep, go
Yeah,
ahead.
they're great. They're
Maggie,
great.
Yes.
can you be sure that I